Hey, welcome back to the Wednesday night Bible study. We're here in the series called Hall of Faith. This is our 15th installment. Uh, this is going to be about Rahab. Because the last couple of weeks, we looked at a man of faith by the name of Joshua. He was God's faithful servant in carrying out God's plan. The plan was for his people to settle in the promised land, the land promised to Abraham. It was he who led the people crossing the Jordan River into the promised land, and it was he who led them in the battle of Jericho. Recall the event was referred to in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days. So if you hadn't caught that last couple of weeks ago, I do recommend you watch that video. So God instructed Joshua to do a very unorthodox military maneuver to take Jericho. I won't retell it, but if you don't know the event, it involved lots of marching around the city and blowing of trumpets, and then the miraculous fall of the walls of Jericho. God used Joshua in this miraculous event. Now there was another character in this battle that the writer of Hebrews brings up. There was a female character who was instrumental in the success of the Battle of Jericho. Let's read about her in a single verse in Hebrews chapter 11. Verse 31, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And a lot of translations have, or unbelieving. So Rahab was a prostitute, a harlot, and she was a Canaanite woman. She was an unlikely person to put faith in the true God of Israel, but she was saved by grace, literally. As I said and we'll read about, she is a named figure in the Jericho event. We'll read how she was not killed when everyone else in Jericho was killed. Because the other inhabitants of the city were marked out for death, she was spared. God, in his mercy and grace, permitted Rahab to live. So we'll learn about this history, this story, a prostitute, spies, death, and being saved in the book of Joshua, chapter 2. Her story does overlap with what we covered the last couple of weeks in Joshua's story. In chapter 1 of Joshua, God had a talk with Joshua, as you recall. He tells Joshua of a certain future for Joshua and the Israelites. In Joshua chapter 1, verse 6, God, speaking to Joshua, says, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. So that becomes Joshua's mission. The rest of chapter 1 relates how Joshua rallied his soldiers for the mission. And that takes us to chapter 2 and the word then. Chapter 2, verse 1. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So Joshua wanted to scope things out on the other side of the Jordan River, right in the middle of the path. Okay, doggies, stop it. Right in the middle of the path, the Israelites would take once on the other side, through the Jordan Valley, and then passing into the Central Highlands, was the walled city of Jericho. I do have a map here. It comes out kind of fuzzy, unfortunately. Shittim, and close to where the Israelites were camped, is the only one that you see the letters over there on the right side of the Jordan River. The Jordan River is the river going through there. So that only city that's named over there, kind of in the middle, that is Shittim. And that's about 8 miles east of the Jordan River. Now go 7 miles in the west direction and you'll come to Jericho. It's about 7 miles west of the Jordan. There are 2 Jerichos. There's the Old Testament Jericho and then there's a New Testament Jericho. The Old Testament is the one above. I'm sorry you can't see that better, but just to give you an idea what we're talking about. We're talking about an encampment over there in Shittim, sending 2 spies across the Jordan over to Jericho. So sending spies was a good military strategy, and Joshua was a good military man. Coincidentally, Joshua had been a spy for Moses. Joshua knew they would have to attack Jericho, but before attacking it, Joshua needed information about this fortress, like its gates, its fortified towers, its military force, and importantly, the morale of the Jericho people. Just how confident were their enemies? So by now the Canaanites at Jericho would have heard of the camp of Israelites on the other side of the Jordan. So 2 men were chosen and sent on a carefully concealed mission. Not even the other Israelites were to know of it. It was concealed, just in case the report was bad. Joshua wouldn't want his men to lose heart before things even began. Let's read on, the rest of verse 1. So then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. The second part of it. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. Aha, Rahab enters the picture. How the spies chose the house of this prostitute Rahab were not told. Maybe they saw her walking the streets and followed her. But couldn't it be providence, the providence of God that led them there? You could say that God's purpose for the visit of the spies to Jericho included more than securing military information. His purpose might have also included his plan for this sinful woman named Rahab. So the spies are with Rahab, but this arrangement doesn't last long. We see right away in verse 2, the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. Well, okay, the disguise of the spies was apparently not adequate. The fact that the king was told implies someone detected they were spies. They even seemed to know their mission. Now, it would be true that the entire city was on alert. Word would have gotten around that the Israelites were camped on the other side of the river. So the king sent messengers to Rahab commanding her to give them up. You know, when I read this, it didn't dawn on me until our commentary pointed it out. The king's men didn't come bursting into Rahab's home, and presumably her place of business, which was her home, and search it, ransack it, looking for these men. The commentator's explanation was that in keeping with the custom, the privacy of even a woman such as Rahab was respected. I found that interesting. Okay, so the king orders her to give the men up. Verse 4, but the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. So Rahab hid the 2 spies. Apparently Rahab also had suspicions about the identity of the 2 visitors. It's hard to know. Was it when she saw the soldiers approaching her house, or did she hide them sooner? Don't know. Continuing on with that same verse, she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. So here she is, freely admitting to those soldiers, the 2 strangers that come to her house. But she said, how could she know their identity and mission? And then she gave them a, you better hurry if you want to catch them. Now here's what really happened, though. It's in parentheses, verse 6. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. I found this interesting, that she took the spies and hid them beneath these stalks of flax, that these stalks would have been placed on her flat roof for drying. After flax stalks were pulled up at harvest time, they were soaked in water for 3 or 4 weeks to separate the fibers. Then, after drying in the sun, the flax was made into linen cloth. So that's where the men were. Verse 7, so the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road. So that would be the soldiers from Jericho. Set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. So it looks like the soldiers took Rahab at her word. It doesn't even say they searched her property. They just went and looked for the men. They definitely must not have gone up on the roof. Instead, they went on this wild goose chase due east to the fords of the Jordan, the most likely escape route. So far, so good for the 2 spies. There's more, but let me pause for a second and talk about something Rahab did. We can see that. Rahab lied, didn't she? Lying is wrong, right? Was Rahab wrong to lie? Well, did the ends justify the means? Her falsehood did protect the spies. If she had told the truth, the king would have killed the spies. But to argue that the spies would have been killed if Rahab had been truthful is to ignore the fact that God could have protected the spies in some other way. It's a tough one. Are there some situations in which a lie is acceptable? Some say that in times of war, deception is allowed. Another explanation is some say she was a Canaanite woman. It was part of their culture to lie. It's a tough subject, possibly condoning what God condemns. But I'd like to leave it at this. The lie of Rahab was recorded, but it was not approved. In Hebrews 11:31, as well as verses we're going to read later in James, God approves or commends her actions in faith, but not her falsehood. Okay, now time has gone very quickly. I think we're going to have to already go to the next part B next week, part 2 next week. So we're leaving it as the soldiers are on a wild goose chase. The 2 spies are hiding up in the roof. We'll see what happens next week, and we'll see how Rahab fares in this whole situation. So until next week, may the Lord be with you. Take care.